And now, the titillating conclusion of Dark Avenger by Alex Ryder. He reached out and pulled her closer, inexorably closer, until she could feel herself once more drowning in the depths of those hungry eyes. "Your darkest hour was last night until I came to your rescue," he reminded her quietly. "Or have you forgotten so soon?" She swallowed painfully. "I almost had, but thanks for reminding me. I suppose you feel that you're entitled to your reward now, is that it?" Their bodies were pressed tightly together now, and she could feel the hard manifestation of his own desire. His mouth slowly descended again, and her lips parted. Now his tongue, and his hands. Her legs were starting to go, and that intolerable ache was back in her loins. He took his mouth from hers and gently nibbled at the lobe of her ear, then whispered, "Please don't insult me, Carrie. I want no reward for acting as any decent man would, freely. No threats, no promises, no strings attached." Her voice trembled with a half-hearted defiance. Why? Why should I?" "Because I want you and you want me," he urged. "What more genuine reason could there be?" Her eyes were now glassy with hot, aching desire, and once again she marveled at the power this man had to provoke such an irresistible craving in her own body, yet, at the same time, an even stronger compulsion to please and satisfy him. There was no emotional reward in it for her, merely the sheer physical pleasure. They'd have sex, and that would be that until the next time. She wanted more, as any woman would, but she was willingly prepared to settle for what was on offer. So what did that make her? A loose woman? A harlot? Or just an ordinary woman coping with her own feminine frailty in a pressure cooker situation? Nikos embodied all that was the best and all that was the worst of the male species. He was a breathtakingly satisfying sexual partner, but there was never any likelihood of him confusing the act of sex with a commitment of love. The words bubbled up from her throat. "Damn you, Nikos! You know the answer. I can't help wanting you." His hand slipped beneath her t-shirt, and his fingers deftly undid the bra. "Good," he whispered. "Those are the words I wanted to hear." He undressed her with an exquisite, leisurely indulgence, removing each article of her clothing to a nerve-throbbing accompaniment of kisses on each new piece of newly exposed flesh. When her briefs were lowered, his kisses became deeper and more urgent, as his mouth traveled up her inner thigh until she suddenly gasped and threw her head back, quivering at this new, totally unexpected experience. Her fingers curled themselves frantically in his dark hair, and she stifled a cry. When she was almost at the edge of total and abandoned frenzy, he took his mouth away and stood up. Gently he lifted her and carried her over to the divan, and she lay on her back, gazing up at him beneath lids heavy and half-closed with pulsing anticipation as he slowly undressed. Finally, he was naked, and he stood over her, his dark skin glistening like silk. Her hot, sultry gaze traveled upwards past the corded muscles of his powerful thighs to the gorged tumescence of his manhood, proud and taut. Above his stomach, hard and flat, then the deep chest and broad shoulders. He looked like some darkly magnificent creation of the gods sent to pander her most shameful and unspoken desires. As he leaned over, she reached for him, her arms wide and her fingers outstretched like some supplicant begging for relief. Carefully, he eased his dark, lithe body beside her as she eagerly sought his mouth with her own. His right hand clasped her bottom, pulling her closer, and she felt the proud and rampant flesh of his sexuality against her thigh. Her breasts were pressed against his chest, her nipples swollen and aching. The smell and the taste of him were inflaming her senses to a white incandescence, and she drew one knee up and hooked her left leg over his, and began sliding her calf up and down his thigh. A low, almost animal growl of approval came from his throat, and he took his mouth from hers to murmur, "I want you, Carrie." Frustration as he continued to tease her with his mouth and tongue instead of pinning her down and claiming possession. And then, blindingly, it came to her what he wanted. For a moment the last shreds of her natural modesty were shocked at the idea. Then her libido broke free, and at the gentle urging of his hand she squirmed her body until she was sitting astride him, her knees level with his waist. He reached up for her shoulders and pulled her upper body forward until her palms were resting either side of him on the divan. Now her breasts, like ripe fruit ready to fall, were only inches above his face. He took one of her nipples in his mouth and feasted hard in an erotic indulgence that sent her into a fit of feverish panting. His hands molded themselves around her slim waist and down over her hips. Then, gently, he began to lift her. As his mouth released her breast, she straightened up and shivered with anticipation. Her actions now owed nothing to experience, but were dictated by urgency and instinct. As he slowly lowered her, she reached down between her legs to guide him in. The slow, lubricous entry sent waves of molten fire through her loins, and tiny moans of ecstatic pleasure escaped her half-parted and swollen lips. He was reaching upwards now, rubbing and teasing each of her nipples between his fingers and thumbs. Utterly lost in an ocean of sensuality, she began to ride the waves of her own passion. Beneath her, he suddenly groaned in pleasure, and as his warm essence flooded into her, her muscles contracted. She arched her spine and threw her head back and cried out in ecstatic disbelief as the spasms continued. Gasping and wide-eyed, she realized that he still hadn't finished, as his powerful hands held her still and his hips rose, thrusting himself even deeper and faster. Oh, God, she thought with awestruck wonder. She was going to, yet again! When it was finally over, she literally collapsed, still astride him, but with her damp forehead leaning on his chest. Gently, he tilted her face upwards and kissed her mouth with a lingering tenderness. At last, she put her hands on his chest and straightened up. "I'm exhausted. I feel as if I've just run a marathon." He looked up at her with a smile of lazy contentment on his face and murmured, "You're good. You're exceptionally good at that." Her passion was spent now. No doubt her old friend's guilt and self-recrimination would soon pay her a visit, but, at the moment, she could still live with herself. "What does exceptionally good mean?" she asked. "Better than your other women?" "Much, much better," he drawled. "Of all the hundreds I've known, you are without a doubt the most passionate." This has been a reading of Dark Avenger by Alex Ryder, read with stifled laughter by Sara Bynoe.